Chapter 1. The Shadow on the Ship. The freighter Mariana Star sliced through the Atlantic like a rusted knife through cold butter. Its engines groaned in protest, belching thick plumes of smoke into the night. Below deck, the crew muttered about the storm clouds gathering to the east. But none of them noticed the small, crate-shaped container wedged behind a stack of bananas in cargo hold 3, one that wasn't listed on the manifest. The air in the hold was humid and heavy with the sweet rot of overripe fruit. Something inside that unmarked crate shifted, slowly, purposefully. First came the faint scrape of chitin against metal, then a soft tearing sound like silk being ripped by invisible hands. From the shadows emerged a mass of bristled legs, 8 of them, long, thin, and twitching as if testing the air. The creature inside had been asleep for weeks, hidden deep within a tangle of webs and dead things. Now it was awake. A single black eye glinted in the darkness, then another and another. Up above, the deckhands laughed and smoked, oblivious to the nightmare that was crawling out of the crate below. By morning, the freighter drifted closer to the New York harbor. Fog rolled in thick and pale, swallowing the skyline. The crew noticed the smell first, like copper and damp earth. Then they found the first body. Mateo, the youngest sailor aboard, stumbled backward when he saw what was left of the cook, his throat locked up. The man was half cocooned in a sticky web, his skin pale and bloodless. Hundreds of tiny white eggs pulsed beneath the webbing, glistening. Sweet Jesus, one of the men whispered, crossing himself. But it wasn't Jesus who was listening that morning. Captain Hanley barked orders, his voice echoing down the steel corridors. Seal off the lower decks. Nobody goes below until we dock. They tried, but the thing that had crawled out of the crate was already moving. Fast. It scuttled through vents and behind cargo, a blur of shadows. When it passed, lights flickered, as if even electricity feared to shine upon it. The crew heard it at night, a faint click, click, click like fingernails on metal, sometimes above them, sometimes beneath. One sailor swore he saw it hanging upside down from the ceiling. Another said it whispered his name in the dark. By the time Mariana Star reached New York Harbor, 5 men were missing. The captain blamed the fog, the sea, anything but what he couldn't explain. He told himself they'd fallen overboard. He told the crew to forget the webs, to ignore the stains on the floor, to focus on the cargo delivery. But when the ship docked that afternoon, the harbor workers noticed something strange. A thick, sticky residue coated the walls of the lower hold, and several crates had been torn apart from the inside. Rats, Hanley muttered. Must have been rats. Rats don't leave human teeth stuck in their silk. That night, under the sickly orange glow of the harbor lights, the creature made its move. It crawled down the gangway, its form blending into the shadows between shipping containers. Rain began to fall, each droplet catching the glow of the city like tiny shards of glass. The spider paused near a gutter, its many eyes reflecting the skyline. Above it loomed the towers of Manhattan, its new hunting ground. It tilted its head slightly as if listening. Somewhere far above, a siren wailed, a taxi horn blared, and the city seemed to exhale, unaware that something ancient and terrible had just stepped ashore. 2 hours later, a stray cat wandered near Pier 39, drawn by the smell of fish guts and trash. It hissed suddenly, arching its back. The shadows near the dumpster moved, not with the wind, but against it. Then came the sound again, click, click, click. The cat bolted, but too late. The darkness unfurled itself, revealing hairy limbs and glistening fangs. The spider struck fast and silent. There was no scream, only the faint rustle of webbing and the patter of rain. Moments later, the creature crawled back toward the sewer grate, dragging its prize behind. It vanished beneath the city with a wet hiss, leaving nothing but a single sticky strand fluttering in the night air. By dawn, New York was waking up. The news vans rolled in to cover the strange incident at the docks. A worker gone missing, another found dead, drained of blood. Authorities blamed an animal attack, rats maybe, or a wild dog, but one man knew better. Detective Rourke stood by the pier, trench coat soaked through, coffee steaming in his gloved hand. He'd seen things before, things people laughed at until it was too late. He crouched near the drain and examined the residue with a grim expression. It wasn't oil. It wasn't glue. It was silk. And deep down, something told him this wasn't just another New York mystery. He looked up at the skyline, at the endless maze of towers and tunnels stretching beneath the streets, and muttered to himself, "Whatever you are, welcome to the city that never sleeps." A gust of wind carried his words into the darkness below, where the clicking had already begun again. Click, click, click. Chapter 2. Arrival in the Big Apple. Rain slicked the city streets in a dull silver sheen as dawn broke over Manhattan. Steam curled up from the grates, wrapping around the ankles of early commuters like ghostly fingers. Beneath those same grates, in the endless arteries of the city's sewer system, something stirred, a ripple in the darkness that had nothing to do with the water's flow. Detective Rourke lit a cigarette and watched the city wake up from his car parked along the pier. He hadn't slept. The image of that sticky silk under the dock lights kept replaying in his mind, like a bad dream he couldn't turn off. The smell too, metallic, earthy, wrong. He took a long drag, exhaled, and muttered to himself, "You've seen weird, Rourke. You've handled weird. This is just rats. Big ones, but rats didn't leave 8 distinct puncture wounds. Rats didn't drag grown men through steel grates without leaving blood behind." He flicked the cigarette out the window, started the engine, and headed toward the precinct. The radio crackled to life with morning traffic and the usual noise. Missing persons, petty thefts, another subway incident. Only this time, the words sewer and attack made him freeze for half a second. He turned up the volume. Officials are still investigating reports of a sanitation worker found early this morning under Canal Street. The body was discovered entangled in what police are describing as a fibrous material, though details remain unclear. Rourke's grip tightened on the wheel. He made a hard turn and hit the siren. Down below, under Canal Street, the tunnels whispered. It was damp, silent, until it wasn't. The spider moved like a shadow given form, its legs tapping lightly against the concrete, pausing every few seconds as if listening. The air was full of vibrations, trains above, footsteps, cars, the city's heartbeat pulsing through the pipes. It felt it all. It was hungry again. The remains of the dock worker were long gone, cocooned and drained, discarded in a nest of wet silk near a broken valve. The eggs that pulsed there now, tiny translucent spheres, trembled at the vibration of their mother's return. She brushed them gently with one leg, then turned her glistening eyes toward the noise above. There were millions of them up there, warm, beating, moving, and the tunnels connected to everything. "Rourke, you look like death reheated." Lieutenant Vega leaned back in his chair, waving a powdered donut in greeting. His desk was a fortress of paperwork, coffee cups, and unsolved case files. "Morning to you, too," Rourke grunted, dropping a soggy folder on the desk. "Canal Street. You hear?" Vega raised an eyebrow. "You mean the guy in the web?" Rourke gave him a look. "You saw it?" Photos came through dispatch. "Thought it was a prank. What, you think we got a giant spider problem now?" Rourke didn't answer. He just stared at the pictures. The body was pale, almost translucent, the eyes wide open. Every drop of blood was gone. I've seen webbing before, sure. But this... Vega shook his head. "I called animal control. Maybe a freak case of, what's the word, arachnid gigantism. Gigantism doesn't spin silk like that," Rourke said quietly. "Then what does?" Rourke didn't respond. He was already walking toward the evidence locker. By nightfall, Rourke found himself on Canal Street, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. The stench hit him first. Stale water, rotting meat, and something faintly chemical. He climbed down the maintenance ladder and landed in ankle-deep sludge. The walls were slick with slime and shadows. Cobwebs, no, webs, hung from pipe to pipe, thick as rope. His light cut through the fog, catching glints of movement. He crouched, brushing the surface of the silk with his gloved hand. Stronger than nylon, sticky, organic. A faint sound echoed deeper down the tunnel. Click, click, click. Rourke froze. He swung the light toward the noise, nothing, just dripping water and the endless hum of the city above. But the sound came again, closer this time. Click, click, click. Something massive shifted in the darkness, brushing against the wall. Rourke took a step back, his heart hammering. "NYPD," he barked, though his voice trembled. "Show yourself." The beam of his flashlight flickered, and then, for just a heartbeat, he saw it. 8 eyes. two fangs glistening with moisture, a shape too large to be real. The light blinked out. He fired blindly, the gunshots deafening in the tunnel. Screams echoed, not human but shrill, furious, almost intelligent. Then silence. When the flashlight came back on, the tunnel was empty except for the web swaying slightly in the disturbed air. Rourke's pulse thundered in his ears. He stumbled back toward the ladder, barely noticing that a thin line of silk had brushed across his boot, like a handshake from something that wanted him to remember. Above ground, the city didn't stop. Tourists laughed in Times Square, taxis honked, and 1,000 bright lights cut through the fog. Deep beneath it all, the spider moved again, crawling upward through the storm drains, following the rhythm of the city like a drumbeat. Its belly was swollen, its hunger growing. It knew the warmth of the streets above. It knew there was more food, and somewhere in the dark, behind a rusted grate, it waited. Still, silent, patient. When the next scream came, it was swallowed by the hum of the city. Chapter 3, The First Night. New York never truly sleeps, but that night it twitched. The air was wrong, too still, too heavy. Thunderheads gathered over the skyline like bruises spreading across the sky. Beneath it all, in the hum of neon and rain, the spider watched. It clung to the underside of a storm drain near Delancey Street, 8 glossy eyes reflecting the glow of passing headlights. Every vibration above thrilled it. Footsteps, voices, laughter, heartbeats. So many heartbeats, so warm. The spider waited, still as death. Its silk thread tongue reached upward, tasting the air, learning the city's pulse. It didn't rush. Monsters rarely do when they know the feast is endless. Up on the street, Lenny Russo, an exhausted line cook from Little Italy, trudged home after his shift. Midnight. Rain again. He cursed under his breath as he stepped into a puddle deeper than it looked. His shoes squelched. He lit a cigarette under the flickering glow of a street lamp, unaware that something was lowering itself behind him, inch by inch, silent as the falling rain. The first thing he noticed was the noise, a faint click-click-click that echoed off the brick walls. He turned, squinting through the drizzle. Nothing. He shook his head and exhaled a plume of smoke. New York rats are getting bigger every year, he muttered. The cigarette hit the ground. The last thing he saw was a blur of black and wet, something huge. Something with too many legs. His scream was cut short, smothered by silk, swallowed by the dark. The street lamp flickered once, twice, then went out completely. By morning, Lenny Russo was a missing person. His raincoat was found tangled in an alley fence. The police chalked it up to possible mugging. Nobody questioned why the fence was coated in a strange, sticky residue that shimmered like glass. Detective Rourke did. He arrived on scene with his trench coat still damp from last night's sewer crawl. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something foul. He crouched near the fence, scraping off a sample with his pocket knife. Not glue, not sap. Silk, he muttered, placing it in a plastic bag. Spiders again, asked Officer Delgado, standing nearby. Boss, you sure you're not overthinking this? Overthinking? Rourke said, eyes narrowing. Ask yourself something, Delgado. When's the last time you saw silk strong enough to bend a steel fence? Delgado didn't answer. Across town, in a shabby basement apartment, June Carter sat cross-legged on her couch, watching her pet ferret twitch nervously. It kept staring at the air vent. Every few minutes it hissed, a strange, guttural sound she'd never heard before. Relax, Pip, she cooed, tossing a cracker toward it. Pip didn't move. Its fur stood straight up. June leaned forward, frowning. Okay, what's wrong with click, click, click? The sound came from inside the vent. June froze. The ferret bolted under the couch. Then the vent grill began to bulge, slowly, pushing outward as if something was behind it, pressing against the metal. June stood, trembling. Who's there? The vent exploded. A blur of limbs, fangs, and silk filled the room in an instant. June screamed once, high and sharp, and then she was gone, dragged halfway into the ductwork. Her hand remained for a moment, twitching, before being yanked into the blackness. When neighbors called the police the next morning about screaming and scratching, all they found was a shredded vent and a ceiling web that shimmered like frost. By now, Rourke had a pattern. The victims were random. The scenes connected only by one thing: proximity to the sewer lines. He stared at a city map covered in pins. The dots formed a spiral, an invisible circle expanding from the harbor outward. "She's moving," he whispered. "She?" Vega asked from behind him. Rourke nodded. "If those eggs I saw in the tunnels hatched. She's feeding fast. Maybe nesting again? We're talking an apex predator with an unlimited food source under the city." Vega rubbed his temples. "You sound insane, you know that?" "Yeah," Rourke said flatly. "But I've been right before." He turned to the window. Rain streaked down the glass like veins of mercury. Somewhere in the city below, sirens wailed. That night, a power outage rolled across Lower Manhattan. A transformer blew near East Broadway. Whole blocks plunged into darkness. In the sudden silence, the city listened. The spider moved unseen through the storm drains, climbing higher, closer to the surface. It could hear them up there, dozens, hundreds, sleeping, unaware. The hunger burned like fire inside her. She had tasted the city's blood now, and she craved more. With a slow, deliberate motion, she crawled toward a manhole cover. The metal trembled. Then, with impossible strength, it lifted, scraping against the pavement as she emerged into the night. For a brief second, a taxi's headlights caught her form in full, a grotesque silhouette of nightmare geometry. Black and glistening, 8 spiked legs splayed across the street. The driver's jaw dropped open. The cab swerved into a lamppost. The spider turned her head, 8 eyes blinking in unison, and then vanished into an alley before the flames could reach her. By dawn, the city was awake again, coffee cups clinking, subways screeching, people laughing. Business as usual. But on the morning news, something caught Rourke's attention. A reporter stood near a cordoned-off street, her voice trembling. "Authorities are investigating multiple animal attack reports overnight, including 2 fatalities. Witnesses claim they saw a large shape moving through the fog." Rourke muted the TV. He didn't need to hear the rest. He opened his notebook and scribbled one word: nest. Then he looked out the window toward the sewer grates lining the street. And for just a moment, he swore he saw something shift, something watching. Click, click, click. The city had no idea. The first night was only the beginning. Chapter 4. The Web Below. The storm had passed, but the city didn't feel clean. The streets glistened under a sickly dawn, and the air carried a metallic tang that clung to every surface. The papers called it another freak accident. 2 deaths, a wrecked cab, a power outage. New York shrugged it off like it always did. Detective Rourke didn't shrug. He hadn't slept again. His coffee was cold, his eyes bloodshot, and his instincts screamed louder than the city's sirens. The pattern on his map had grown. 5 new pins in 24 hours, all circling the storm drain system like blood spots on a beating heart. Something was moving under their feet. By noon, Rourke had pulled together a reluctant crew. Officer Delgado, younger, eager, but green. Hal Brennan, sanitation supervisor who'd spent 20 years in the tunnels and swore he'd seen it all. And Lydia Park, a biologist from the city's environmental health division, who carried a field kit full of sensors, cameras, and a stubborn disbelief in anything that didn't fit inside a microscope. They met at the entrance of an old maintenance shaft near the East River. The smell hit them first, decay mixed with mold, and engine oil. "Sweet mercy," Delgado muttered, pulling up his collar. "That's New York perfume." "Id," Brennan said, lowering his flashlight. "Been breathing it half my life." Rourke adjusted his shoulder holster, scanning the black hole yawning before them. "Stay close, stay quiet. Whatever's down there, it's hunting ground now." The descent was slow. Metal ladders slick with condensation, the air growing colder with every step. Their lights barely cut through the mist curling along the tunnel floors. Water dripped in rhythmic taps, echoing through the maze of pipes. Brennan pointed his beam toward the junction ahead. "This connects to the old water treatment lines. Been shut down since the 80s. You don't want to get lost here." "Detective, I don't plan to," Rourke said, though his gut already felt the pull of the dark, like the place itself was alive and listening. They turned a corner and stopped dead. The walls were no longer brick. They were webbed. Thick white silk coated every surface, stretching in layers that shimmered faintly when the flashlights hit them. Webs the size of blankets hung between pipes, trembling with invisible life. Lydia gasped. "This isn't spider silk. Not any species I know. Look at the tensile structure, it's industrial strength. Stronger than Kevlar. Delgado reached out to touch it. Don't. The silk moved. A ripple shivered down the wall as if the entire tunnel had just taken a breath. Delgado jerked back, heart pounding. Yeah, Rourke said tightly. No touching. They pushed deeper. The air grew warmer, thicker, and buzzing with a low hum. An unnatural vibration that rattled in their bones. The tunnels opened into a massive chamber, easily the size of a basketball court. And that's when they saw it. A nest, dozens, no, hundreds of eggs clung to the walls. Translucent and veined, pulsing with faint blue light. Inside each, something twitched. Oh my God, Lydia whispered. They're alive. Rourke's flashlight drifted toward the center of the chamber, and his throat went dry. A human body hung there, suspended upside down, cocooned from neck to toe. Only the face was visible, pale, waxy, and expressionless. The skin was stretched thin, like every drop of blood had been sucked out. Delgado swallowed hard. Who is that? Rourke squinted. Judging by the ID badge, sanitation worker. The one missing since Monday. Brennan stumbled back a step, trembling. Detective, I've seen rats big as dogs down here, but this ain't nature. Lydia crouched near the wall, snapping photos, her hands shaking. We need to report this immediately. Evacuate this entire sector before... She stopped. The hum grew louder. Rourke lifted his gun. Lights off now. They killed their beams and the chamber plunged into blackness. The only light came from the faint glow of the eggs, and from 8 cold, glimmering reflections near the ceiling. Click, click, click. Delgado's breath hitched. Tell me that's water dripping. It's not, Rourke whispered. The sound descended, slow and deliberate. They could hear the scraping of claws on concrete, the hiss of silk sliding through the air. Move, Rourke ordered. The creature dropped from the ceiling like a nightmare made flesh. 8 legs hit the ground at once, shaking the floor. Its body glistened with slime. Its fangs glowed faintly green, and its eyes, dozens of them, blazed with an alien hunger. Delgado fired first. The muzzle flash burst against the dark, and the spider shrieked, a sound like tearing metal. Bullets punched into its abdomen, but it didn't fall. It charged. Chaos exploded. Webs flew through the air like netting, sticking to walls, boots, hair. Lydia screamed as a strand caught her arm, yanking her off her feet. Rourke slashed it with his knife, grabbed her by the jacket, and shoved her toward the exit. Go! Move! Brennan's flashlight spun across the floor, catching the spider's body in a flash, its face horrifyingly human-like around the mouth, mandibles twitching where lips should have been. Then it vanished back into the webbing. Rourke fired again and again until the chamber echoed like thunder. Then silence. Only the hum remained. They didn't stop running until they reached the ladder. Delgado went up first, dragging Lydia behind him. Rourke covered the rear, his pistol shaking in his grip. At the top, they slammed the manhole shut and fell into the street, gasping, filthy, alive. Brennan leaned against the wall, retching. What in God's name was that? Rourke didn't answer. He just stared at the sewer cover beneath them, the faint click, click, click still echoing from below. Finally, he looked at Lydia. You said those eggs were alive? She nodded weakly. Hundreds of them. Maybe more. Rourke stood, jaw tightening. Then this city sitting on a ticking bomb. A low rumble of thunder rolled overhead. But it wasn't the sky that made them shiver. It was the realization that something beneath the streets had just been disturbed. And it was angry. Chapter 5. The Missing. The city didn't notice the disappearances at first. New York was good at ignoring things. A homeless man vanishes under a bridge, no one cares. A night janitor doesn't clock in. His boss replaces him. A subway musician never comes back to his corner. Someone else takes the spot. But in the spaces between the noise, the flickering lights, the endless hum of traffic, the city was bleeding people, and Rourke knew it. By the end of the week, 11 new missing persons reports crossed his desk. Each one different. Each one near a sewer line, subway station, or storm drain. Every victim last seen between midnight and 4 a.m. Coincidence? No chance. Rourke stared at the crime board until his coffee went cold again. Photos of smiling faces. Construction workers, delivery drivers, a school teacher, stared back at him like ghosts. Red yarn traced lines between locations that formed a rough spiral curling toward the city center. "Vega," he said. "This isn't random. She's moving, like she's circling inward." "Who?" Vega asked tiredly. Rourke turned to him. "The spider." "The thing in the tunnels." Vega slammed his palm on the desk. "Jesus, Rourke, enough with the monster stories. I've got the mayor calling about urban panic. You want me to tell him a giant bug is eating taxpayers?" Rourke leaned forward, voice low. "Tell him something's hunting down there, and it's not done yet." That night, the city pulsed with nervous energy. Unmarked vans rolled through the streets, sanitation department logos freshly printed, though the faces inside weren't sanitation workers. They were soldiers, armed and uneasy, moving under orders no one would acknowledge. Rourke stood on the corner of East 14th, trench coat flapping in the wind, watching them. Lydia stood beside him, holding a thermal scanner. "They're pretending this is pest control," she said. "Government's idea of pest control usually leaves holes in the ground," Rourke replied. Her scanner beeped softly. "Look at this, heat signatures underground, bigger than cars. Whatever you shot at in the tunnels, it's not alone," Rourke frowned. "It laid eggs. That means there's more now, maybe dozens." Down below, the nest had grown. The eggs that had glowed faint blue before now throbbed with golden light. Tiny black shapes moved inside, tapping against the translucent walls. One cracked open with a faint hiss. Then another. Dozens hatched in silence, spilling a swarm of slick, leggy newborns that skittered along the walls and ceilings, vanishing into pipes, drains, and cracks. The mother watched from above, massive still, her abdomen pulsing like a furnace. She could feel the city, the vibrations of millions of lives thrumming through the ground. The prey density was perfect. The nest no longer confined her. It was a base. Now she would spread. By morning, chaos began quietly. The first subway of the day screeched to a halt between stations. Power failure. Commuters waited in the dark for an hour before help arrived. When rescuers opened the first car door, the people inside were gone. Every seat empty except for a hanging web that shimmered in the flashlight beam. In Queens, a dog walker reported a giant shadow pulling something into a manhole. He was dismissed as a drunk until the manhole was found cracked in half. On the Lower East Side, water pressure plummeted. When a maintenance crew went down to check the valves, only one came back, and he couldn't speak, just stared at the ceiling, whispering, "Eyes." So many eyes. The mayor ordered a citywide inspection of sewer lines by morning. Rourke didn't wait. He and Lydia descended again through a maintenance hatch behind an old diner. This time they came prepared. Riot lights, flamethrower units borrowed from the hazmat team, and a portable camera rig. Delgado insisted on joining despite Rourke's protest. "Sir," Delgado said, gripping his weapon, "you're not going back down there without backup." "Kid," Rourke muttered. Down there is no backup. The tunnels were different now, alive. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing. Every step sank into layers of silk, muffling their boots. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the dripping water seemed afraid to make noise. Half a mile in, Lydia's monitor beeped again. Thermal signatures, multiple, all around us. Delgado swung his light. "Where?" The beam caught a flicker of movement. Small, fast, dozens of them. "Run!" Rourke shouted. The ceiling came alive. Hatchlings poured down like liquid shadow, their tiny fangs clicking in rhythm. Lydia screamed as one landed on her shoulder, its eyes glowing faintly. Delgado grabbed it, slammed it against the wall, and fired. The bullet ricocheted, sparking against the pipes. "Keep moving!" Rourke yelled, dragging Lydia forward. They reached an intersection and froze. At the far end of the tunnel, framed in the cone of Rourke's flashlight, stood the mother. She filled the corridor from floor to ceiling. Webs clung to her body like armor. Her mouth opened slowly, releasing a hiss that vibrated in their skulls. Delgado raised his flamethrower. Now. A jet of fire roared through the tunnel, igniting the webbing like fuse wire. The creature screeched, thrashing, walls shaking. Molten silk dripped from the ceiling as they ran, smoke blinding them. They burst through a maintenance door and collapsed on the other side, coughing and gasping. Behind them the flames roared, but not for long. The sound that followed chilled them all. A deep, echoing hiss, then silence. Lydia wiped soot from her face. Please tell me that killed it. Rourke looked back toward the burning tunnel, where something massive was moving through the fire. It didn't, he said. Hours later, above ground, the media spun chaos into rumor. Electrical faults, chemical leaks, urban myths. But Rourke stood alone at the pier, staring into the black water where the Mariana Star had first docked. It started here, he whispered, and now it's everywhere. Somewhere deep below the waves, air bubbles rose to the surface, followed by a faint, familiar sound that seemed to echo through the city's veins. Click, click, click. Chapter 6. The Hunter Emerges. The city smelled like rain and electricity again. Storms always came before blood. By now, the news anchors didn't know what to say anymore. One day it was mysterious disappearances. The next, unexplained sinkholes. Entire subway sections were being closed for maintenance. The public was restless. Fear was crawling through New York like an infection, and Detective Rourke was done playing defense. He wasn't chasing shadows anymore. He was going to hunt them. At dawn, Rourke stood in a repurposed sanitation warehouse near the waterfront, now a makeshift command center. Portable lights buzzed overhead. Maps of the sewer grid covered the walls, littered with pins and grease pencil circles. Vega had finally caved to pressure. You've got your task force, he'd said the night before. But you're on your own if this turns into another circus. So Rourke built his own circus. There was Lydia Park, who had turned her lab coat into body armor and swore she'd document the discovery of the century. Officer Delgado, pale but determined, carrying a shotgun and enough caffeine in his veins to power a generator. And a handful of others, volunteers, specialists, desperate souls who'd seen too much to pretend anymore. They called themselves the Hunters, though nobody said it with confidence. All right, Rourke said, pointing to the red-marked map. We hit here. Section 9B, the old subway spur under Roosevelt Park. Multiple heat signatures. Something's nesting again. Lydia adjusted her headset. I've cross-checked with sanitation schematics. There's a dry service tunnel parallel to the main one. We can move in quietly. Delgado frowned. And if it's waiting for us? Rourke holstered his sidearm. Then we stop running. The descent felt different this time. They weren't explorers anymore. They were soldiers marching into a graveyard. Their boots splashed in shallow water, radios crackling in the static-laden dark. A chill crawled up Rourke's spine as his flashlight swept across old graffiti. Help us! Half buried under layers of silk. The deeper they went, the thicker the webs became. The walls looked grown, not built. Organic, veined with movement beneath the surface, like the tunnels themselves were alive. Lydia whispered, "These structures are evolving." She's using the city's heat and moisture to expand the webbing network. It's feeding itself, Delgado muttered. So the whole sewer's becoming one big spider web? Rourke didn't answer. He'd already noticed something else. Human bones tangled in the silk. Hundreds. The tunnel opened into a cavernous space, the remnants of an abandoned subway platform. The old signs were still there, rusted and half swallowed by web. Roosevelt Park, Exit 3. Their lights flickered. Something was moving in the shadows. Not fast. Slow, deliberate, like a predator that already knew it had you cornered. Hold positions, Rourke hissed. The hum started again, deep and guttural, vibrating through the floor. Then, from behind the collapsed pillar, the creature stepped into the light. The spider. But not the same. It was larger now, swollen and armored in layers of metallic silk that shimmered like oil. Its eyes reflected their flashlights, burning like coals. 2 human skulls were fused into the silk around its thorax, grim trophies from earlier hunts. Lydia's voice cracked through the headset. That's impossible. The heat from the last fire, she absorbed it. She's mutating. Then aim for the head, Rourke said. Delgado fired first. The shotgun roared, spraying shells across the platform. The creature shrieked, a noise so loud it shattered nearby glass. Its legs slammed into the ground, sending waves of vibration that knocked everyone off balance. The tunnel lights exploded. Total darkness. Lights. Get those lights back! Rourke shouted. A flare hissed to life, painting the chamber in hellish red. For one brief, vivid moment, Rourke saw the spider crawling along the ceiling directly above them, its abdomen swollen and pulsing with light. Move! It dropped like a collapsing bridge. Delgado dove, the impact shaking the tunnel. Two others were caught. Screams cut short as webbing wrapped them in an instant. Rourke rolled to his feet, drew his sidearm, and fired point blank into one of the spider's eyes. Black ichor splattered across the floor. The creature reared back, shrieking, but didn't fall. It turned on him. For a heartbeat, he met its gaze. Those 8 burning orbs staring down at him, ancient and cold, almost intelligent. Then it lunged. Now! Lydia screamed, slamming the detonator. Charges planted earlier erupted down the tunnel, a rolling wave of fire and debris. The blast threw them backward, dust choking the air. For a long, terrible moment, all Rourke could hear was ringing, and then, faintly, the click, click, click again, slower this time, fading into the distance. When the dust cleared, the tunnel was half collapsed. The spider was gone. Lydia coughed, wiping soot from her face. It's still alive. Rourke holstered his weapon. Then so are we. That's all that matters for now. He looked at the cracked ceiling above. Daylight trickled faintly through the gaps. The city was up there, oblivious. Hours later, back at the command post, Vega stood watching Rourke's footage on loop. The brief glimpses of the creature, the legs, the size, the webs, were enough to make even him pale. "What do you want me to tell City Hall?" Vega asked quietly. "The truth," Rourke said. "But they won't believe it until they see it crawling up Wall Street." He lit another cigarette, staring at the flickering monitor showing thermal signatures across the grid. One by one, more red dots began appearing, small, scattered, spreading outward. Lydia's voice trembled. "They're moving to the surface." Rourke's cigarette burned down to ash. "Then it's not the spider anymore," he said grimly. "It's the colony." A low rumble echoed from somewhere below, shaking the floor. Dust drifted from the rafters, and far beneath the city, in the burned ruins of Roosevelt Park Station, the mother spider began to stir again. Her carapace cracked and oozed. Her children called to her in the dark. The hunt had only just begun. Chapter 7. The Lair Revealed. By the third week, New York City wasn't just afraid. It was changing. The streets still buzzed. The lights still burned, but an unspoken tension hung in the air like fog before a storm. Garbage trucks rolled through the night spraying pesticide. Helicopters hovered over the rivers with floodlights. And in the subways, the air smelled faintly of ammonia and decay. Something below was feeding faster now, and Rourke could feel it in his bones. The command post was a madhouse. Maps glowed under fluorescent lamps. Radios squawked nonstop with chatter from the containment units deployed across the city. But containment was an illusion. The red dots on the thermal monitors, those heat blooms Lydia tracked, had multiplied by the hundreds. She stood by the monitor now, face pale. They're spreading north, through the utility tunnels. Manhattan's under their web. "Where's the largest concentration?" Rourke asked. She hesitated, then pointed. "Central Park." Rourke frowned. "There's no access tunnel under the park." There wasn't, Lydia said softly, until something dug one. Hours later, they stood at the park's northern edge, near an old maintenance gate fenced off and forgotten by the city decades ago. The smell hit them before they even got close, sweet rot like wet leaves mixed with blood. Delgado gagged. "Smells like something died in there." "Yeah," Rourke said. "A lot of somethings." They pried the gate open. A gust of air rolled out, warm, damp, and alive. The tunnel beyond sloped downward into darkness, lined not with concrete but with silk, thick rope-like strands that glowed faintly green, pulsing like veins. "Jesus," Lydia whispered. "It's turned the whole park into a living nest." Rourke flicked on his headlamp. "Then we burn it down." They descended for what felt like miles. The further they went, the more the tunnel widened, until the city felt like a distant dream above their heads. The walls undulated faintly, as if breathing in rhythm with something massive below. Delgado's radio crackled. "Command, this is Hunter Team 3. We've got movement near the reservoir." Static, then a scream, then silence. Lydia flinched. "We're not alone down here." They pressed on, weapons raised. The tunnel opened into an enormous cavern, the forgotten foundation of an unfinished subway expansion from the 1930s, buried and abandoned before it could connect to anything. Now it was the spider's cathedral. The ceiling stretched 50 feet high, webbing draped from every beam like banners of a long-dead empire. Cocooned shapes hung by the hundreds, some small, some horrifyingly human-sized. In the center, a mound rose from the floor, pulsing, twitching, alive. Lydia's scanner beeped frantically. Oh my God. The heat signatures, there are thousands eggs. This whole structure is an incubator. Rourke stepped closer, his flashlight catching the mound. It wasn't dirt. It was flesh and silk, fused together in a grotesque spiral. Embedded in its surface were bones, skulls, and half-digested shapes twitching faintly. Delgado whispered, How can it live like that? It's not living, Rourke said grimly. It's thriving. Then the sound came. Click, 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 deeper, heavier, closer. The cavern trembled. Dust rained from above. From the shadows behind the mound, the Spider Queen emerged. If the last encounter had been a monster, this was a god. Her body filled the chamber, her legs scraping the walls. The chitin shimmered like glass, threaded with glowing veins of crimson. Her mandibles dripped a viscous substance that hissed when it hit the floor. She had changed again, mutated beyond any earthly form. Her abdomen pulsed like a beating heart, translucent enough to show the shadows of hundreds of writhing hatchlings inside. Lydia gasped. She's breeding nonstop. She's using the city's heat grid to incubate them faster. Rourke raised his rifle. Not anymore, he fired. The shot hit the abdomen. The spider shrieked, the sound shattering eardrums. Its front legs slammed down, cracking the concrete. Delgado fired the flamethrower, the webbing igniting like dry paper. The cavern turned into hell. Flames roared up the walls, devouring silk and bone. The spider thrashed, screeching, swinging its limbs wildly. One caught Delgado full force, throwing him 20 feet against a wall. His scream ended in a burst of static over the radio. Rourke charged forward, dodging debris. Lydia, the charges. She fumbled with the detonator, hands shaking. They're not linked. I need 30 seconds. We don't have 30. The spider lunged. Rourke dove aside, the leg smashing the ground where he'd stood. He rolled, drew his sidearm, and fired directly into one of its eyes. The creature shrieked again, recoiling, black ichor splattering across the webbed floor. Lydia finished the connection, slammed her thumb on the trigger, and shouted, Now! The explosion tore through the nest like a hurricane of fire and smoke. When Rourke came to, the air was thick with ash. His ears rang. The cavern was collapsing, beams falling, webbing melting into black ooze. He staggered to his feet, searching for Lydia. She lay near the wall, covered in dust but breathing. He hauled her up. We're not dying down here, move. They stumbled toward the exit, ducking falling debris. The roar of collapsing stone echoing behind them. The queen was still moving, half buried, on fire, screeching as the ceiling came down around her. At the tunnel's mouth, Rourke turned back one last time. The creature stared at him through the smoke, eyes glowing faintly. Then the roof caved in, burying her beneath a mountain of rubble and flame. They emerged into Central Park just as dawn broke, crawling out through a cracked maintenance grate near the pond. Smoke curled up behind them, faint but rising. Lydia collapsed on the grass, coughing. Is it over? Rourke stared at the skyline, the early sunlight painting the buildings gold. Maybe, he said quietly. For now. But even as he spoke, a tremor ran through the ground beneath them, soft, rhythmic, pulsing. Lydia met his eyes. That's not aftershock, is it? Rourke didn't answer. He just looked toward the nearest sewer grate. A single thread of silk fluttered from it, glistening in the morning light. And from below, faint and deliberate, came the echo that would haunt him forever. Click, click, click. Chapter 8. The Battle Below. The sky above Central Park burned orange with dawn, but below the surface, beneath the concrete arteries of Manhattan, the city was bleeding out. The explosion had collapsed much of the nest, but not enough. The seismographs across the city still trembled every few minutes. Subway power surged and failed in waves. Water lines ruptured. Whole sections of the lower grid had gone dark. And through it all, one sound kept whispering through the comms, through the static, through the walls of every tunnel they monitored. Click, click, click. It wasn't over. Not even close. Rourke stood in the command post with a fresh map spread across the table. his hands shaking from exhaustion and rage. His shirt was torn, his left arm wrapped in a blood-stained bandage, and his voice was raw from smoke. Lydia was hunched over the console beside him, patching into the city's seismic network. Whatever's left down there is moving. These readings show it's alive, big, angry, and deeper than before. It's burrowing beneath the river now. Delgado limped over, his right leg in a brace, burns climbing up his arm. So we failed? No, Rourke said, lighting a cigarette with a trembling hand. We pissed it off. 3 hours later, they descended again, this time with a full strike team. 10 men, 2 flamers. Military support denied by City Hall, of course. Gas leak containment, the mayor had called it. But Rourke didn't need authorization anymore. He was past orders. This wasn't about paperwork, it was about survival. The elevator dropped them into the newly collapsed sections under Midtown. The heat was suffocating, the walls slick with condensation. Smoke from the earlier blast still hung thick, curling around their headlamps like ghosts. This way, Lydia said, her scanner pulsing red. Thermal spike ahead. The tunnels groaned like a wounded animal as they pressed forward. Webs covered the ceilings again, but now they pulsed faintly. The silk had veins, Rourke muttered. She's regrown the hive. She's merging with it. Like a queen ant, Lydia whispered. The city's her colony. The tunnel opened into a cavern Rourke hadn't seen before, colossal, black, and slick. It wasn't built by men. The walls were ribbed with hardened silk, forming spires like bone, and in the center, pulsing in the gloom, lay the queen. Half her body was fused to the nest itself, embedded in layers of web and concrete. The explosion had shredded one side of her, exposing glistening muscle and twitching legs. Her abdomen, swollen and glowing, pressed against the tunnel floor like a beating heart. She's dying, Delgado whispered. Rourke shook his head. No, she's transforming. As if on cue, the spider stirred. Her eyes opened, 16 of them now, red and weeping light. Her breathing came in guttural, clicking waves. The surrounding walls began to tremble in sync with her pulse. Lydia gasped. She's fusing to the infrastructure. She's becoming part of the city. Set the charges, Rourke barked. Every wall, every column. We bury this entire chamber. The team spread out, planting C4 along the perimeter. Delgado and 2 others worked the far wall when the queen's head snapped upward. The clicking became deafening, echoing in every direction. Then the ceiling cracked. Smaller spiders, hundreds of them, poured out like black rain. They clung to the walls, ceilings, faces, biting, screeching, swarming. Fire! Rourke shouted, flames erupted. The tunnel became an inferno. Webs ignited in a chain reaction, turning the air to smoke and screams. Delgado swung his flamer wildly, clearing a path. Lydia's goggles fogged with sweat and soot. Charges are set. Someone yelled. We gotta move! Rourke turned just in time to see the queen tear free from the wall. She lunged, slamming her front legs into the ground, splitting the concrete like glass. The shockwave threw them all to the floor. Delgado was caught beneath a falling beam. Rourke tried to reach him, but the spider's shadow fell over them. Her mandibles opened wide, dripping, glowing venom. Go! Delgado shouted. Do it, detective. Rourke hesitated, just for a moment. Then he ripped the detonator from his belt and ran. He and Lydia sprinted down the corridor, the ground buckling beneath them, the roar of the queen filling the air. The entrance collapsed behind them. Rourke hit the switch. The explosion was biblical. Fire ripped through the tunnels in a storm of pressure and dust. Buildings above ground shuddered. Steam burst from every grate in Midtown. The Hudson River boiled where the tunnels met the water. For a moment, the entire city seemed to breathe out, then silence. Hours later, emergency crews worked through the wreckage. Rourke sat on the curb, blanketed, coughing smoke, eyes hollow. Lydia sat beside him, staring at the sunrise over the skyline. You think she's gone? She asked. Rourke took a long drag of his cigarette. The hand holding it trembled. I think we buried her deep enough to buy time. Time for what? He exhaled. For her to heal. Or for something worse to hatch. They sat there in silence as sirens wailed, and the wind carried the faint smell of sulfur from below. Then Lydia frowned. Do you hear that? Rourke froze. From beneath the street, deep, distant, but deliberate, came a faint vibration. Click, click, click. the sound of something waiting, something remembering, something patient. That night, when the power returned, surveillance cameras across Manhattan flickered with static. For a brief second, every screen showed the same image. A single glowing red eye surrounded by silk, then black. Chapter 9. Victory. Almost. It rained again that morning. The kind of cold, relentless drizzle that blurred the skyline and washed the city's sins into the sewers. New York breathed, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid to exhale too loudly and wake whatever still slept beneath its streets. For the first time in weeks, the headlines weren't about disappearances or gas explosions. The news anchors smiled again. Traffic moved. Tourists took photos in Times Square. Life, as always, had decided to pretend nothing ever happened. But Rourke knew better. He stood by the East River staring out at the water where it all began. The Mariana Star's docking point, the harbor that had birthed the nightmare. The surface rippled in the rain, silver and black. Somewhere down, there beneath the concrete and steel and memory, lay a graveyard of web and ash. Or so he hoped. His phone buzzed. "Rourke," he answered. Detective Vega's voice came through, tired but tight. "We've got something at the morgue. You'd better come." The city morgue was quieter than usual. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, reflecting off the stainless steel like a bad dream on repeat. The smell of antiseptic and old air clung to the walls. Rourke followed Vega down the corridor, every footstep echoing. Another body? Not exactly. They entered a cold chamber lined with freezer drawers. Lydia was already there, pale and wide-eyed, wearing surgical gloves. On the central table lay a sealed containment case. Inside it, half submerged in formalin, was something that looked almost human. "What am I looking at?" Rourke asked. Lydia swallowed. One of the corpses recovered from the blast site. A tunnel worker, or what's left of him. The body's skin was gray, translucent. The veins beneath it pulsed faintly, though there was no heart beating. The chest cavity was distended, swollen like something inside was pushing outward. Rourke frowned. "That's not decomposition." "No," Lydia said, "it's gestation." She lifted a flashlight and shone it through the chest cavity. Beneath the flesh something moved, tiny legs, dozens of them. "Jesus Christ," Vega muttered, stepping back. Rourke felt his throat tighten. "We burned her. We buried her. How the hell—" "She laid them inside the bodies," Lydia said hoarsely. "Parasites. The smaller hatchlings. She didn't just feed, she seeded." As if on cue, the corpse twitched. A hairline crack formed along the rib cage, splitting the flesh. Then came the sound, soft but unmistakable. Click, click, click. The glass containment case rattled. "Get that thing sealed," Vega shouted. Too late. The chest burst open in a wet, violent spray. A spider the size of a hand skittered across the table, black and glistening. Another followed, then another. The room erupted in chaos, shouting, slamming metal trays, boots stomping, gunfire. Rourke drew his pistol and fired twice, the echo deafening in the sterile chamber. One of the creatures splattered against the wall. Another darted beneath a cabinet, vanishing. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the refrigeration units. Rourke's chest heaved. Lydia stood frozen, blood on her gloves. Vega cursed under his breath. Finally, Lydia whispered, "They're newborns, smaller, smarter, adapted for survival." Rourke reloaded. Then the Queen didn't die. She just made sure she'd never have to fight alone again. That night, the three of them sat in Vega's office, exhausted, haunted. Rain streaked the windows, thunder rolling over the river. Vega poured 3 glasses of whiskey and said, "The mayor wants a statement. What do I tell him?" Rourke stared at his drink, the amber ripples catching the light. "Tell him it's over." Vega raised an eyebrow. "It isn't, though." "No," Rourke said softly. "But sometimes you lie to the city so it can sleep a little longer." At 2:47 a.m., the night guard at the morgue stepped out for a smoke. He leaned against the wet brick wall, lighting his cigarette under a flickering bulb. Behind him, inside the building, something scurried across the floor, quiet, fast. A small vent cover shifted, then fell. The guard didn't notice, but when he turned back, the light above him went out. He frowned, tapping the bulb. Damn power. A drop of something sticky hit his shoulder. He looked up. The last thing he saw was a silhouette, tiny, black, and many-legged, crawling along the ceiling. Then came the sound, faint but clear over the thunder. Click, click, click. Back at his apartment, Rourke sat in the dark, staring at his wall. On his desk lay the spider's broken fang he'd kept from the tunnels. A trophy, or maybe a warning. He lit another cigarette, watching the smoke curl toward the ceiling. For a moment, he thought he saw movement in the corner of the room, just a flicker of shadow. He blinked and it was gone. He exhaled slowly. "Not tonight," he whispered. "Please, not tonight." But from somewhere deep inside the vent behind his refrigerator came a sound that froze his blood. Click, click, click. The city never sleeps. And now neither would he. Chapter 10, A New Beginning. 6 months later, New York healed on the surface. The broken streets were paved, the collapsed tunnels sealed. The news moved on, back to politics, crime, celebrity gossip. The sewer gas explosion of 2025 had become just another entry in the city's long list of strange events that nobody wanted to think too hard about. But in the quiet moments, when the trains paused between stations or the lights flickered for no reason, people still whispered. Because some nights the city still clicked. Detective Rourke sat in a diner on 34th and Lex, stirring cold coffee with a shaking hand. The rain hadn't stopped for days. He looked older, thinner. His eyes carried the 1,000-yard stare of a man who had seen something he could never fully explain. Lydia sat across from him, nursing a tea she hadn't touched. Her hair was shorter now, her lab badge replaced by a plain jacket. She'd resigned 2 months ago, officially for stress-related burnout. Unofficially, because she couldn't stop hearing that sound every time she closed her eyes. They sat in silence. "Finally," she said, "the city's quieter now." Rourke gave a dry laugh. "That's what it wants us to think," she sighed. "You ever consider leaving? Get out, start over somewhere? Montana, maybe. No sewers." Rourke looked out the window where the rain streaked like spider silk. "And when it spreads there, when it crawls under their soil?" Lydia stared at him, then lowered her voice. "You think it survived?" Rourke didn't answer immediately. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sealed evidence bag. Inside was something small, black and gleaming. A fang half the size of a knife blade. "Found this last week," he said quietly. Construction crew in Brooklyn uncovered a drainage line that wasn't on any blueprint. "They found silk." Lydia's face went pale. "No." "Yeah." He slipped the bag back into his pocket. "Whatever we buried, it's still down there." Breeding slow, learning. Across the river in New Jersey, the Mariana Star's rusted hull sat in dry dock waiting to be scrapped. The workers laughed as they cut through its metal sides with torches, joking about mutant rats and dock ghosts. One man, Reyes, crouched near a sealed container half buried under debris. It was small, rusted, unmarked, like the crate that started it all. He pried it open with a crowbar. "Hey, boss," he called. "What's this thing?" "Some kind of old cargo?" No answer. Inside the crate was a cocoon the size of a football, slick and pulsing faintly under the flashlight beam. A single white thread drifted upward, catching the wind. Reyes leaned closer. "The hell?" The cocoon twitched. Something cracked. Then came the sound, soft, familiar, unmistakable. Click, click, click. Reyes dropped the crowbar. "Oh, hell no." The torchlight went out. The scream never reached daylight. 2 weeks later, a maintenance diver for the Hudson River Authority recorded unusual seismic activity near the old tunnel line. The report was buried. The divers who went to check didn't come back. In his apartment, Rourke poured himself a drink and stared out at the skyline. Thunder rolled in from the east. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, the reflection in the glass wasn't his. It was something behind him. 8 faint glimmers of red, arranged in a circle. He turned sharply. Nothing there, only the hum of the refrigerator. The quiet buzz of the city outside. Then faintly, from the vent above his head, click, click, click. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I knew you'd be back."